Televisión de acceso público.
Now that we are familiar with the concept of the tree of life existing around the human body as a field of energy similar to the Indian concept of chakras, we can finally return to ritual practice with the implementation of the middle pillar exercise. Having cleansed and dressed as usual, stand with eyes closed facing west and visualize above the head in Kether a white sphere of light vibrating the name Ahaya. From this sphere, bring a column of light down into the throat in dark, where you will visualize an indigo sphere whilst vibrating the name Yahweh Elohim. Then you shall bring the column of light down further into the chest at Tiferet, where you shall visualize a golden sphere vibrating the name Yahweh Aloha Vidot. Then bringing the pillar of light further down to the crotch at Isod, thou shalt visualize a violet light and vibrate the name Shaddai Al-Kai. Finally, you shall bring the column of light all the way down to your feet, through and into the ground, where you will visualize yourself standing upon a black sphere, where you shall vibrate the name Adonai Haaretz. At this you shall momentarily enjoy the feeling of your Western ceremonial chakras.
It's Chester.
(1874), people are so good fat with the use of getting the four great images that you can do as the world of Kavach. It is a great problem that the...
Welcome to the future. Please, remain calm.
Having established the central column of the tree as an energetic center within your aura, it is now time to branch out from the middle pillar ritual by performing the Kabbalistic cross. The Kabbalistic cross is similar in form and function to the more typical sign of the cross, also called crossing oneself, with the exception being that the Kabbalistic cross is crossed from right to left rather than left to right. Also, the Kabbalistic cross tends to be drawn much larger, the lowest extension of the cross being drawn down to the dantian, groin, or floor. As well, the utterances have been changed from the Christian admonition to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. These differences aside, the purpose of the performance of this gesture is relatively similar, that is, to spiritually balance and harmonize a person's soul and body before interacting with divine or profane powers. To perform the Kabbalistic cross, first cleanse and dress as usual, then stand facing east, taking the sword or sword mudra to the forehead, where you will visualize a white light in Kether saying Ate. As before with the middle pillar ritual, bring down a column of white light all the way down to the floor, where you will visualize another sphere saying Malkuth. You will then touch your right shoulder and create a red sphere saying Ve Gebura, bringing a new beam of light across the chest to touch the left shoulder, where you will create a blue sphere saying Ve Gedula. Then bring the hands together at the center of the cross, creating a sphere of gold, saying Le'olahim Amen. With this etheric shield guarding your philosophical meridians and humors, you will be at least partially safeguarded into your ventures into the interstice, as well as having properly calibrated the elemental forces within your astral body for use in magical practices requiring direct energy projection.
Like I said, like, you don't feel like you're stupid kicking. I don't feel like I'm in, but I think
This is a public service announcement. Do not be alarmed.
Much like the tree of life, the pentagram is a multifaceted symbol that is also fractal in nature. Strangely, it can be found inside the tree in some versions. On one hand, it is a symbol in itself with multiple meanings, powers, and uses. For example, it is a symbol of Gebra due to it having a geometry of 5 and therefore a sign of strength, force, or war. but also inside its structure it contains multiple symbols for the forces of nature and describes their interaction, thereby creating a philosophical model of the universe. Then there is the matter of the sub-angles, which are fractal. Each point of the pentagram is linked to one of the four classical elements: earth, air, water, or fire. Within each of these points is a smaller pentagram, also containing these elements. These sub-elements referring to the various qualities of the major elements. For example, the fiery quality of water might be its turbulence. However, you may have noticed that the pentagram has 5 points and not 4. This is because the fifth element of spirit is added as the top point, representing its power to control the other elements. There is one more element though, as the nature of the spirit element we just referred to is called active spirit. But there is another called passive spirit. Passive spirit is not seen as controlling the elements, but as binding them together or keeping them harmonious with each other, and this could be attributed to the central chamber of the pentagram. Many of these symbols can be found in 777 in the various columns in Table 2. However, at this time, our focus is how the pentagram can be a different symbol, depending on the stroke order of how it is drawn. As mentioned earlier, each of the 4 points of the pentagram is attributed to one of the 4 classical elements. An easy way to remember this is to visualize the tarot card, the World, as standing in front of you. The animals in the corners of the card represent the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac and their elemental attributes, the cow being Taurus and Earth, the angel representing Aquarius and Air, the eagle, Scorpio and Water, and the lion, Leo and Fire. To banish any specific elemental energy, taking the sword, begin with the point pointing at the particular element in question, proceeding then to draw the pentagram until returning to the starting point. To invoke any specific element, use either the wand or the weapon attributed to that element and start across from the element, moving in a pattern that scoops up the element in question at the first turn. The only exception being the spirit elements, which do not start from the top point, but rather from the 2 bottom points, active being banished from the point of air, or invoked from the point of fire, which are seen as active elements, and passive being banished from the point of water and invoked from the point of earth, which are seen as passive elements. It is also worth noting how the air and water pentagrams are linked. Though the other elemental pentagrams mirror each other, they are distinct, but the water and air pentagrams use the same line as their starting point, meaning that invoking one banishes the other, which is somewhat symbolic of the water cycle.
In my opinion, it's just better that he was cast out and bound for his crimes. Do you even realize how many...
Welcome back to Cable 72.
In the last chapter, we gave a brief overview of the varied symbolism of the pentagram, particularly its use as a sign for banishing or invoking the various elements. This may be all too complex for you at the moment, which is a shame, as we provided a perfectly good device for memorizing that formula easily and may require you to revisit and review the previous material. For now, however, we need only concern ourselves with the banishing pentagram of Earth as we return to our ritual practice with the performance of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. The lesser banishing ritual is a short ritual for the general banishment of any unwanted entities in any particular location and can be used on its own or as a component in a larger ceremony. To begin, facing east, perform the Kabbalistic cross, crossing yourself up, down, right, left, saying Ata Malkut Vegebra Vegedula Le Elohim Amen. Then, taking the sword, draw the banishing earth pentagram, starting at the cow corner and going up over the top in a clockwise direction, following through to complete the shape. At this, thrust the point into the center and vibrate the name Yahweh. Then perform the sign of silence, placing the sword mudra of the left hand over the mouth while keeping the proper sword outstretched. Pivot to the south, keeping the sword outstretched to draw a quarter circle in the air. Lower the sign of silence and draw another banishing earth pentagram. Upon thrusting into the center, vibrate the name Adonai. Make the sign of silence again and move to the west. Draw another banishing pentagram, this time vibrating the name Ahaya, following again with the sign of silence. At last, in the north, draw the pentagram and vibrate the name Agla, finishing again with the sign of silence as you rotate back to the east with sword still outstretched, completing the circle. Having come to the center of the circle, facing east, give the sign of Osiris Slain, which is a stance more commonly known as a T-pose. From here, you will say, before me Raphael, behind me Gabriel, on my right hand Michael, on my left hand Ariel. For about me flames the pentagram, and in the column stands the six-rayed star. You will then repeat the Kabbalistic cross as it was done in the beginning, crossing yourself up, down, right, left, saying Ata Malkut Vegebra Vegedula Le Elohim Amen. As mentioned in previous chapters regarding the history of modern occultism, Mr. Crowley had an obsession with correcting the system of the Golden Dawn, often rewriting many of the rituals to resonate better with his own personal mythological system called Thelema. This would mostly keep the dance steps of the ritual intact, merely changing the Hebraic god names with Helleno-Egyptian names. A great example of this is the star ruby, which Crowley first presented in his Book of Lies as an alternative to the lesser burnishing ritual. It is worth noting, however, that Crowley could never overcome his habit of correcting, especially with this ritual, as there exist at least 2 different versions. For reference, we will be using the original version as it appears in the Book of Lies. To perform the star ruby, first cleanse and dress as usual, then stand facing east and declare Apo Pantos Kakodaimenos. You will then perform the Kabbalistic cross, replacing the normal Hebrew admonition to the Lord with the words Soy, Ophale, Iskouros, Eucharistos, Iao. You are then directed to imagine the pentagram in your mind rather than to draw it in the air, and to cast it to the east using the sign of projection, saying the name Chaos. Follow this with the sign of silence as you move counterclockwise around the circle to the north, where you will fire off another pentagram saying the name Babylon, making again the sign of silence as you move to the west, where you shall launch another pentagram saying Eros, and again with the sign of silence as you go to the south to shoot the 4th pentagram saying Psyche, and then making the sign of silence again as you return eastward. You will then say Yo Pan and perform the Nox signs, the sign of Mintu, the sign of Pan, the sign of Virgo, the sign of Babylon, and the sign of Mater Triumphant. You will then stand in a T pose and say Pro mu Euges, Opiso mu Teletarkai, Epidexia Sinoces, Eparistera Daimones, Flege gar perimo o asterton pente, Kai en thestele o asterton hex estic. You will then close with the Kabbalistic cross as you had done in the opening, saying Soy, Ophale, Iskouros, Eucharistos, Iao.
Anything goes. It's chaos.
Much like Aleister Crowley, Peter Carroll was a rebel who thought he was the only person who really understood magic. To this end, he helped create a new magical school of thought that today we call chaos magic. inspired by the punk rock attitude of Austin Spare, but too much of a fan of the evil wizard aesthetic of Crowley to dispense with the traditional rituals entirely, he too offers an extremely stripped-down variant of the Lesser Banishing ritual in his Liber Chaos, which he calls the Gnostic ritual of the pentagram. To begin, stand facing any direction whatsoever. Then perform the middle pillar ritual, replacing the traditional god names with the vowel sounds I, E, A, O, U. Then, to vibrate that entire sequence of vowel sounds as one yow, whilst drawing the pentagram and visualizing it strongly in the mind. Though it is not specified how the pentagram is to be drawn with regards to stroke order. You are then to turn counterclockwise as in the star ruby, as this direction is more typically associated with banishing. You will then repeat the process of drawing the pentagram whilst intoning the iau in all the quarters until you return to the original starting direction. To close, you will again perform the middle pillar ritual as it was done before, saying I, E, A, O, U. In the previous chapters, we have discussed the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and a few of its better known variants. This is because we cannot stress the value of this ritual enough, both as a ritual itself, but also as a convergence point of occult symbolism. Aleister Crowley once said, "Those who regard this ritual as a mere device to invoke or banish spirits are unworthy to possess it. Properly understood, it is the medicine of metals and the stone of the wise." The lesser banishing ritual may have lesser in the name, but in reality, it is the greatest ritual of all, as it contains the template for other circle-type rituals which litter the systems of Golden Dawn and Thelema, and can be found in many different cultures and traditions throughout time. Most practitioners fall somewhere on a spectrum ranging from superstitious to iconoclastic, and it is for this reason that the serious student should create their own variant of the lesser banishing ritual, using names and symbols important to your own personal mythological symbol system and/or religious aesthetic. Peter Carroll also discusses how to create your own custom banishing ritual in Liber Null, though the template is somewhat sparse. We shall elaborate on the technique of developing your own custom ritual of the pentagram in this video, which is itself the postmodern deconstructivist ritual of the pentagram. Step 0. Facing. East is typically the preferred direction in most collegiate Western occult systems. However, in many more pedestrian settings, the most important direction is north, or perhaps in the direction of some specific location considered sacred to that tradition. 1. The declaration. It is typical in this ritual to begin with a standard declaration of intent. In this case, the banishment of any unwanted forces that may pollute our experiment. 2. Humeric harmonization. The operator then performs a small internal ritual designed to align their etheric energies, activate their magic powers, and protect their spiritual organs from assault. This can be something like the Kabbalistic cross, the middle pillar ritual, pranic breathing, or kundalini activation. 3. The sigille. It is at this point in the ritual that the pentagrams are drawn, and if the composer wishes to use pentagrams, it is highly recommended they use banishing earth pentagrams unless they are specifically attempting to banish a particular element, which should not be necessary, as the banishing earth pentagram is sufficient to banish spirits of any element whatsoever. However, if the pentagram is not drawn but only visualized, there is no reason it couldn't be imagined as a completed shape, therefore not requiring a specific stroke order. It should be mentioned, however, that one not need to use pentagrams, but could use smudges, crosses, or even personalized sigils in their place. Ideally, it should be a symbol of power, force, or protection. 4. The names. As the sigils are erected, the magician vibrates magical words or god names. These should, of course, be replaced in your custom ritual, but one shouldn't just use any names, as there is quite a large difference between the names that occur in this part of the ritual and the names that occur later. In the lesser banishing ritual, these names are tetragrammatae, one of several names for the singular God of Abraham, each consisting of 4 letters and having such deep symbolism that each name is less a name and more of a formula. In the star ruby, each name is that of a specific deity in the Thelemic mythological landscape, each one corresponding to a member of the court of the tarot, king, queen, son, and daughter, which are seen as aspects of a universal and therefore singular entity. 5. The circle. It is at this time that we turn to each compass direction, repeating the process of erecting the barrier and intoning the words, and is up to the student to decide if they will turn Diosel or Widdershins. Many variants of the lesser banishing ritual will change the direction to a counterclockwise spin, as this direction is more typically associated with banishing, as we have discussed, whilst clockwise is usually associated with invoking. 6. T-pose. When the circle is completed, the magician then stands in the center in a T-pose to release the magical energy within the body into the space that has been created with the barrier of sigils. It is for this reason that the T-pose mimics the shape of the Kabbalistic cross, only larger. Crowley, with his flair for the dramatic, decided to embellish this section by adding more dance steps, while Carroll removed it entirely, probably in an attempt to remove as many crosses from the ritual as possible. Though a T-pose is simple and entirely sufficient, there may be some reason the composer may wish to add additional gestures at this point, though it is recommended that the shape of this attitude be related to the form of whatever gestures are used to replace the Kabbalistic cross. 7. The Guardians. We then call upon the second set of names, which are more like proper names and far less abstract than the god names in the first section. In the Lesser Banishing ritual, these are the names of archangels which govern over the specific compass directions, whereas in the Star Ruby, they are the names of classifications of spirits from which a sorcerer could recruit familiars or servitors. They are meant to represent active agents in the quarters, unlike god names in the previous section, which impart more of a passive, general magical energy. 8. Affirmation of the hexagram. Optional. With the circle now completely formed, the practitioner affirms that the ritual is complete. This segment can be removed or embellished as desired. 9. Humeric reharmonization. To close the ritual, perform a reprise of the Humeric harmonization used at the opening. It is again worth mentioning that it is desirable that the shape of this gesture be related in some way to the gesture given in the center of the ritual. Ideally, a smaller or microcosmic version of the same shape, as this has the added benefit of compressing the sphere created by the ritual and internalizing it, whether you continue your greater ceremony or return to the mundane activities. Peter Carroll also discusses
engineering without whatever dispensing for an RSS. Guy, maybe different.
Shelter immediately.
Okay, this is not a test.
masked man was spotted near Colorado, believed to be Billy Bruce.
Engineering authorities advise you to be on the alert for a masked, a cryptid, possibly.
Lately, because of targeted ads, browsers, and apps reading all your posts so they can decide what ads to send you. Suddenly, all these ads.
Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? How long has it been? It's been so long, hasn't it? It all happened so fast. There's something I remember, but I forget. Faded, distorted. Can't even remember some really important stuff. Thought I wouldn't need to anymore. Thought it was all over. It was supposed to be over. It should have been over. So what is this? What even is this? Man, that movie was terrible. Kirk looked like a fucking lunatic. Can't believe that guy in the face paint was the most sane.
Welcome back to Cable 72.
Generally speaking, the usual reasons people come to seek out magic as a solution to problems in their lives are typically selfish and awful, including but not limited to lust, money, control, or revenge. However, another common reason people seek out magic is for protection, which may seem innocent and banal on a surface level, but needing protection implies that they are probably on the run for being involved in some non-magical activities that are selfish and awful. In the previous chapters, we have discussed at length the lesser banishing ritual, its variants, and the instructions for customizing your own banishing ritual. We have also discussed many other basic setup rituals and provided some context for these spells and their place in the tradition of chaos magic as a school. And we can now proceed to compile all the lessons so far into one larger ceremony. However, no ceremony is complete without its main stage business, that being the symbolic action performed by the magician, which describes the metaphor of the desired outcome, and for that we must cover the concept of physical circles and energy grids. Creating a circle or grid in this instance is a physical action requiring the actual execution of geometry on the physical plane of existence, with physical items or substances accompanied with ritual performance and intent. Circles and grids, like any sigil, can of course be used for any purpose whatsoever. However, the form and the size of grids and circles particularly lend themselves to such things as generating power in a specific location, attracting things to a certain location, or creating a barrier to keep things out of a certain location. The creation process is not unlike building a fence. First, obtain several objects to act as fence posts. These are often small crystals, and a type of crystal should be selected that meets the flavor of the ritual as much as possible. Correspondences for these can be found in the much beloved Crystal Bible or in Cunningham's Book of Crystals and Metals. However, other magical components, such as plants, could also be used as fence posts, and correspondences for these can be found in Cunningham's Book of Magic Herbs. You will then need a material or substance to serve as the actual fence, such as a liquid or powder that can be spread as a trail to connect the pylons. Although this can be done internally with energy, in the event that the shape of your fence is too large or otherwise too suspicious to be pouring salt and holy water on the ground while you wander through a busy district in your city. To begin, you will first bathe while saying the Asperges Me as directed in Chapter 1. Then you'll go about cleaning your home as discussed in Chapter 2, going about your home starting at the front door and around in a counterclockwise fashion until you have finished cleaning in every room and completed the circuit, returning to the front door. You should then return to the bath and bathe again, saying the Asperges Me, and then dress yourself for ritual as shown in Chapter 3, saying the Per Sanctum Mysterium. You can then prepare your altar, assembling the magical tools created in Chapters 8 through 15, though you may want to bring fresh water and salt to consecrate new for this particular event, as well as the materials you are using to create the circle grid. You will then face east and begin with the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, or some variant as discussed in Chapters 27 to 32. And then perform the middle pillar ritual from Chapter 26. You will then light your incense and candles and proceed to bless and sanctify the water and salt as discussed in Chapter 9. You will then bless and consecrate the materials you are using to create the circle grid, making sure to iterate the magical intention, symbolism, metaphor, and purpose of the selected materials, sprinkling them with salt and water and fumigating with incense. In this example of a spell of protection, we could hypothetically use black tourmaline crystals as the fence posts and the holy salt as our fence line. You will then quit the altar and proceed to go around placing the fence posts in the desired shape. The number of fence posts and the shape of the shape are also layers that you can include symbolism to your ritual by incorporating symbolically appropriate numbers from 777. This can be as simple or complex as desired, ranging from one crystal in each cardinal point inside of the house, or can be done outside of the house, at every corner of the property line, which might include many irregular turns and angles, or even on a large scale, covering an entire neighborhood in order to draw some specific sigil or shape. This, of course, should be done in a counterclockwise circuit. Once completing the shape, you will go around again to lay the fence line, powerfully visualizing it as you pour the salt, water, or whatever substance in a trail to connect the pylons. Do this both creating the line from light as in Chapter 5 and also seeing yourself from above, creating the shape on earth as in Chapter 6. When the shape is complete, return to your altar to collect the water, salt, and incense and return to the front door. Then go around the home again in a counterclockwise fashion, blessing and fumigating each room, making sure to cross or banish all doors, windows, mirrors, shadowy places, and sources of water before returning again to the altar. You can then create a paper talisman if you like, saying something along the lines of Hecas este bebeloi, consecrated, placing it somewhere sensical, such as by the front door, after the fashion of a mezuzah, adhering it with your sealing wax. You will then return to your altar, sincerely and internally praying for this effect to have effect. To close the ritual, you will perform a slightly calibrated lesser banishing ritual. Rather than facing east, stand inside the home looking out of the open front door, using that as the new east for the purposes of this banishment. You will then perform the lesser banishing ritual, following which you will throw the remaining salt and water out of your front door and then slam the front door shut.
Hechizos con mi amigos. Araton.
Welcome back to Cable 72.
Welcome back to Cable 72.
Hello and welcome back to the Ritual Specialist. Though it may seem as if we've taken 33 episodes to teach only the techniques required to perform the most simple spell for protection, this is not the case. Each chapter in this lesson plan has actually contained more magical options than just the one. This was also done to protect the student, as in some cases, magic can be quite volatile or sensitive, depending on the practitioner's disposition as well as various environmental factors. The techniques covered so far and their suggested uses have all been inoffensive, inasmuch as they shouldn't cause harm to others or rile up spirits in such a way as to make them aggressive. However, the suggested uses are only suggestions, and the creative student will quickly realize other applications. Therefore, at this time, we will pause in introducing new rituals to briefly review and expand on the previous lessons. For those of you just joining us, welcome to episode 34 of a series. It is highly recommended that you watch the previous videos in this course available in a playlist below, as these lectures are cumulative, each one building off ideas laid down in previous chapters. However, for advanced students who are just joining us, who perhaps already know most of these lessons, this video can serve as a reference guide for the older episodes, which you may want to poke around in for fun, and if our brand of humorless humor is your thing. Each time the total runtime of the current string of videos reaches around an hour, we issue a compilation of that string, which will more or less keep each string centered around one goal. Book 1, chapters 1 to 18, mainly concern the making of a magical book, thereby arming a magician who can create such a book. Chapter 1 regards the Asperges May, a very simple purification ritual in the Solomonic magical tradition. Though it is highly recommended the beginner perform the ritual as is because of its powerful pedigree, the intermediate student might pare this down, washing only the hands and face, and or changing the words if they find admonishing the Abrahamic God particularly offensive. An advanced practitioner might not perform this ritual at all, seeing as they have probably created other methods for creating the boundary between magic time and normal time. Chapter 2 is about cleaning. It is important to clean for so many reasons, including basic hygiene. Fortunately, we live in an era where cleaning products are readily available in a way like never before in history, and it is possible to make a space completely sterile both in a physical and a spiritual sense. But this is really about setting the mood. If you are trying to contact a holy and pure God and its messengers, then the space you are in had better be holy and pure. However, when attempting to contact lesser spirits, there are other things one can do to set the mood. For example, setting the lights down low and lighting a candle, but leaving a window open nearby, just a crack, to encourage the candle to flicker in a talkative fashion while you get out the Ouija board at your next slumber party. Of course, at the end of this, we recommend you return to the bath before performing any serious ritual, as you may be dirty from all that cleaning. Chapter 3 is the recitation of the Per Sanctum Mysterium, which does not actually have an original Latin, and was forcibly translated into Latin to be the complement for the Asperges May. In this ritual, we don the magic vestments as part of the reminder of the difference between magic time and normal time. After all, by attempting to use magic, you are essentially training your mind to be a gun, and it may be wise to put a safety on that gun so it doesn't accidentally go off any time you point it at anything. In Chapter 4, we cover a basic meditation of thoughtlessness, in case the person taking this course is totally unfamiliar with such things. It is also the most safe type of meditation, going along with our philosophy of encouraging an attitude of responsibility amongst would-be thaumaturgists. It is also a meditation that is good and of great benefit to the mental health for anyone, be they a beginner or a master. In Chapter 5, we suggest a technique for visualizing magical light that might even work for people suffering from aphantasia. This, of course, already allows us to perform sublime-level, empty-handed sigil magic, but that, of course, is quite advanced. In Chapter 6, we open our third eye with the meditation of seeing, using our other senses to increase our situational awareness and map it onto a visualized space in our minds, giving us sight beyond sight. This technique is extremely good for developing a 3D spatial sense, which is great for magical visualization for so many reasons that it is indispensable. However, it also enjoys great benefit in everyday life, allowing the user to avoid accident, seize opportunity, or even design and engineer products in their mind's eye. Chapter 7 is merely a shopping list of materials required for the upcoming experiments regarding the construction of the book. In Chapter 8 The conjuration of the sword is given, which allows us to move on to chapter 9, where we use the sword to bless and sanctify water and salt. The water and salt is then used to conjure the sword again, making it slightly more legitimate. With these tools, we can already perform low-level banishings on anyone or anything. With a magic sword, holy water, and sanct salt, we move on to chapter 10, where we consecrate the candles, incense, and fire-starting tools, which we then use to bless the sword again, completing its enchantment. This is now a complete set of consecration tools that we can use to consecrate anything for intended magical purpose, as well as to banish or purify anything and to perform high-level blessings, with the use of incense burner and magical cup, as well as perhaps a mortar and pestle and some other tools. The entire science and art of magical herbalism opens up, but that, of course, is an entire subject of deep study. In chapter 11, we consecrate a pen and ink, giving us access to the power of sigil magic, though we won't discuss that topic until later. In chapter 12, our sigil magic becomes more legitimate with the introduction of magic paper. In chapter 13, we consecrate the other magical tools we will need to manufacture the magical book, which pushes our arsenal away from being centered on consecration and opens us up to a variety of options. With the needle and thread, one can construct other magical garments, or to embroider sigils like those mentioned in the Black Pullet. Scissors, hammers, and nails can all be used to help create other magic tools or to perform symbolic actions in a ceremony. And of course, the fabric, clay, wax, and glue can be used to fashion things such as idols, puppets, or other small symbolic objects. In chapters 14, 15, and 16, we discuss the creation of the book, its consecration, and suggestions on what to write within. A grimoire is, of course, the primary tool of the sorcerer, as it generally contains the spells to create new magical tools and is therefore less easily replaced than the other magic tools. In chapter 17, we teach a simple procedure for making a custom wax stamp from the materials we have already consecrated. Though it is somewhat unnecessary and superfluous, it adds a bit of aesthetic panache and an additional layer to add sigils in Western-style talismanic paper magic. Having now armed the magician completely, in chapter 18 we issue a disclaimer as the completion to Book 1. All the experiments up to this point have been safe magic, meaning that we haven't suggested that you do anything in particular. The spells have been designed and ordered only to put the student in this position. So far, nothing has been done to rile up the spirits or cause any harm to the self or another. The practitioner may even choose to do nothing at all with these tools, putting them away forever. However, at this point, the topics may begin to verge into things that are adult and or dangerous, and it is important that the viewer be warned. Book 2, chapters 19 to 25, mainly introduces you to the system of 777, which we will be using as our main symbol set. As much like the metric system, it makes conversions of measurements very easy. Chapter 19 gives a short glossary of commonly used terminology in the chaos magic community. Chapter 20 gives a short history of magic, as that history was understood by our forefathers. Chapter 21 gives a somewhat more accurate depiction of the history of magic. Chapter 22 is another shopping list, suggesting you obtain a tarot deck and a copy of 777. Chapter 23 gives the basic technique of gematria. Chapter 24 gives the basic technique of syncretism. And in Chapter 25, we finish the lesson with a very basic discussion about the Sephiroth. Book 3, though incomplete as of the recording of this video, mainly covers the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, for which we have finally laid down enough symbolism to fully appreciate. Chapter 26 is the middle pillar, a simple ritual to align the chakras. Chapter 27 is the Kabbalistic cross, another simple ritual for harmonizing the humors. In Chapter 28, we give a brief discussion of the pentagram, preparing you to perform the lesser banishing ritual by giving the entire system of elemental pentagram magic. Which finally brings us to Chapter 29 and the performance of the lesser banishing ritual. In Chapters 30 and 31, we discuss some variations of this ritual and encourage you to create your own custom version in Chapter 32. At this point, we string all the lessons together into one ceremony for a spell of protection in Chapter 33, in which we have basically given you enough instruction to perform any spell or ceremony you could imagine. So we must again reiterate our disclaimer. Up until now, we have only suggested safe practices and spells that are benign, such as blessing, consecration, and protection. However, as we proceed further into our discussion of the circle rituals in the tradition of GDOTO, we will begin to perform rituals of evocation as well as the rituals in the Z2 documents, all of which have specific ends and as such cannot be considered as safe or banal as the ones mentioned previously.